$54 billion. That is how much Amazon borrowed, even though it already had tens of billions sitting in cash. It was the fourth largest corporate bond sale in American history. Why would one of the richest companies on earth borrow money it did not need? Because what happens next may become the biggest corporate bet of this decade. That single question opens up one of the biggest and quietest financial stories in the world right now. Because behind every headline about artificial intelligence and the future, a small group of the richest companies alive are taking on debt at a pace we have not seen in a generation. More than $500 billion of it. And almost no one is asking the question that matters most. Who pays if the bet does not work? Welcome to the money trail. Let us follow it. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is about one thing: connecting the dots between money, power, and the decisions that shape your world. No jargon. No agenda. Just clear research-backed analysis that tells you the story behind the money. Now let us get into it. First, 2 quick words, in plain English. When a company borrows at this scale, it usually does it by selling something called a bond. A bond is simply an IOU. Investors hand over cash today, and the company promises to pay it back later, with interest. The second word you will hear a lot in this story is hyperscaler. It sounds technical. It is not. It simply means the small handful of technology giants big enough to run the world's data centers, the enormous computer warehouses that power artificial intelligence. Keep those 2 ideas in mind, and the rest of this falls into place. Now, the numbers. Because they are genuinely difficult to believe. In just the first 6 months of this year, 6 of the largest technology companies in the world borrowed more than $240 billion. That is roughly double what they borrowed in the whole of last year. And here is the line worth reading twice. In 6 months, they borrowed more than they had in the previous 5 years combined. We are talking about the giants: Amazon, Microsoft, Google's parent company, Alphabet, Meta, and Oracle. And newer names are now joining the queue. Amazon alone raised around $54 billion in March, then returned for another $25 billion in July. One major chip maker at the center of it all borrowed $25 billion, its first large bond sale in years. Even a private rocket company lined up for a similar amount. Add it all together, and analysts at major banks now expect the total debt tied to this boom to reach around $570 billion this year alone. $570 billion. That is larger than the entire annual economy of most countries on the planet. All of it borrowed, in 12 months, to build one thing: the physical foundation of artificial intelligence. And to see how quickly this happened, consider one statistic. 2 years ago, this kind of borrowing was a tiny sliver of the corporate debt market. Barely 1%. This year, it has grown to nearly 1 in every $5 of top-rated corporate debt. A trickle has become a flood. So the obvious question is, why? Why would companies sitting on mountains of cash choose to go into debt? The answer is a race. The largest technology arms race of our era. Every one of these companies believes the same thing: that whoever builds the most computing power, the fastest, wins the next decade. And building that power is extraordinarily expensive. Picture vast, windowless buildings, filled wall to wall with specialized chips. Each chip costing tens of thousands of dollars. Thousands of them in a single room. The building consuming as much electricity as a small city, and needing constant cooling simply to stay running. The land. The power. The chips. The water. Imagine trying to build thousands of power plants, warehouses, and supercomputers. At the same time, that is essentially what big tech is attempting. It adds up to what may be the most expensive construction effort in corporate history. This year alone, the 5 biggest players are expected to spend more than $600 billion on it. And here is the key detail. Their profits, even their enormous profits, cover only about half of that bill. The other half comes from borrowing. Now, borrowing to build is not reckless on its own. If you are convinced the future runs through your machines, locking in long-term debt to build them first can be a rational bet. These companies are not borrowing because they are short of money. They are borrowing because they would rather owe than miss the future. That is the logic. But the market has started to ask a harder question. What if the future takes longer to arrive than the debt does? For a long time, investors could not get enough of this debt. Earlier this year, when these giants offered bonds, buyers lined up for nearly 5 times what was on sale. But something has shifted. By the middle of this year, that appetite had roughly halved. For some deals, buyers barely covered what was on offer. When Amazon returned to the market in July, it reportedly had to sweeten the terms, offering a little extra return simply to get the deal done. In everyday life, that is a small thing. In the bond market, it is a warning light. It means the people lending the money are beginning to feel nervous. And then there is Oracle. Oracle has been spending aggressively to keep pace in this race. And this year, a major ratings agency cut its credit rating, down to just 1 notch above what the market bluntly calls junk. The reason they gave was the company's rapidly rising spending. The cost to insure Oracle's debt against default jumped. Now here is the part that deserves real attention. Much of this borrowing is happening in the open. Public bonds. Visible. Trackable. But a great deal of it is not. Analysts estimate that hundreds of billions of dollars in data center financing is being pushed into private arrangements and complex, off-the-books structures. One estimate puts that hidden pile as high as $800 billion. And when debt slips into the shadows, it becomes far harder to see who actually gets hurt if the returns do not appear. The public numbers may no longer tell the whole story. There is one final signal. Some of these deals are beginning to look circular. One giant recently agreed to an arrangement worth roughly $300 billion to supply computing power to a partner. The difficulty is this. That partner has not earned the money yet. And the facilities have not been built yet. Money promised, for machines not yet made, to serve demand not yet proven. If that sounds familiar to students of history, it should. Because we have seen this film before. Return to the late 1990s. A new technology was reshaping the world. The internet. And to carry it, companies raced to lay fiber-optic cable across the globe. They borrowed enormous sums to do it. More than $500 billion. Their pitch to investors was intoxicating. Internet traffic, they promised, would explode. Grow 1,000% a year. Demand would be, in their own word, infinite. So they built. And built. And built. Then reality arrived. Traffic did grow. But nowhere near fast enough to fill all that cable. By the early 2000s, an estimated 90% of the fiber they had laid sat completely unused. The industry even had a name for it. Dark fiber. Cable buried in the ground, lit by nothing, earning nothing. And when the revenue did not come, but the debt payments did, it collapsed. Prices fell by more than 90%. Giants of the age, names like WorldCom and Global Crossing, went bankrupt. Between 2000 and 2002, telecom companies lost more than $2 trillion in value. And the investors who had lent them the money. In many cases, they recovered around 20 cents for every dollar. There was even an equipment maker at the heart of it, quietly lending money to its own customers, so those customers could turn around and buy its products. On paper, it looked like booming sales. In reality, the company was financing its own demand. A loop. Then the customers went bankrupt, and the sales and the loans vanished together. One famous investor from that era put it perfectly. He said he could still hear the cable salesman swearing that demand was infinite, right up until the moment it was not. But here is the cruel twist of the whole story. The fiber was not a bad idea. The internet genuinely needed it. In time, that very cable became the backbone of the modern web. The technology was right. The timing and the debt were fatal. The infrastructure survived. The people who paid for it did not. Now, before we assume history is about to repeat itself exactly, let us be fair. Because there are real reasons this time could be different. And honest analysis means giving you both sides. In the year 2000, the borrowers were hundreds of small, fragile companies, betting everything on demand that did not yet exist. Today, the borrowers are among the most profitable companies humanity has ever built. They earn real revenue from real products used by billions of people right now. They are funding roughly half of this build-out from their own pockets before they borrow a single dollar. Back then, the demand was a dream. Today, the demand for computing power is very real, and it is already here. And by some measures, today's share prices, while high, are not yet as stretched as they were at the peak of the dot-com mania. Even the conditions differ. In the year 2000, borrowing was becoming more expensive. Today, many expect it to become cheaper. There is one more point of comfort. Even in the wreckage of the year 2000, the strongest survived. And in time, they thrived. The giants of today are built to weather a storm. The real danger is not that artificial intelligence disappears. It is that the bill arrives before the rewards do. So this is not a prediction of doom. It is a risk worth understanding clearly. And even the people building this boom admit it. The head of Google's parent company has said openly that he sees, quote, elements of irrationality in the current wave of spending. He added that if this ever unravels, no company would be immune. Not even his own. When the architects of the boom begin naming the risk out loud, it is worth listening. So let us return to the question we began with. Who pays if this goes wrong? Follow the money, and the trail runs wider than you might expect. First, the lenders. Pension funds. Insurance companies. Ordinary savers whose retirement money sits quietly inside bond funds. A great deal of this debt ends up in exactly those places. If it sours, ordinary people feel it, often without ever knowing they were exposed. Second, the workers. These companies are pouring fortunes into machines. And to protect their profits while they do, several of the biggest names have already begun trimming their workforces. When a bet is this large, something usually has to give. And it is not only the technology giants. An entire ecosystem has grown up around this boom. Chip makers. Builders. Power companies. Thousands of smaller suppliers. Many have staked their own futures on the spending never slowing down. Third, the wider economy. All this borrowing does not happen in a vacuum. At the very same moment, governments are borrowing at record levels too. And there is only so much money to go around. When the giants absorb hundreds of billions, it can quietly raise the cost of borrowing for everyone else. For small businesses. For governments. And perhaps, eventually, for you. And finally, the deepest risk of all. Confidence. Markets run on belief. The belief that the spending will pay off. That the machines will earn their keep. That the future is close enough to justify the debt. For now, that belief is holding. The spending continues. The bonds keep selling. But belief is a strange kind of fuel. It can carry a market higher than anyone imagined, and then vanish, almost overnight. So where does this leave us? Not with a prediction, but with a short list of things to watch. Watch the appetite for this debt. If lenders keep pulling back, that is the market quietly voicing its doubt. Watch the companies being downgraded, the way Oracle was. And watch the money slipping into the shadows, where the real risk prefers to hide. The technology at the center of all this may well change the world. Just as the internet did. But changing the world, and paying for it, are two very different things. The fiber-optic dreamers were right about the future. And it still ruined them. $500 billion is now riding on the bet that this time, the timing works. Maybe it will. History does not promise a crash. But it does leave us a warning. When the borrowing races ahead of the proof, someone, eventually, pays the difference. This connects directly to a story we told earlier on this channel, when we asked who would pay for America's $39 trillion debt. The players change. The lesson does not. Debt is a promise about the future. And the future does not always keep it. That is the money trail behind the AI borrowing boom. And now you have followed it. If this video helped you see the risk behind the headlines, hit subscribe. Because every week, we follow a new trail. And there is always another trail waiting to be uncovered. I am the Money Trail. See you next week.